everyone. So yeah, here we are, the final episode. And before I get into anything like negative or positive about the episode, I just want to say that this ending in itself was perfect. Like this was the like I love this ending in the manga, and just the way it ended here, I just loved it. Now, with that said, with this being the final episode, I thought I'd also start by giving this thing an autopsy, just the series as a whole. And I've seen in general, I've seen a lot of people compare like the structure of the Shaman King reboot's adaptation to something like Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, in the sense where it does condense a lot of the earlier material in order to make room for the parts of the manga story that wasn't covered in the series original adaptation. And this is something I both agree and disagree with, in the sense where both condense a lot of the beginning beats of the story, but I'd argue the way those beginning sections were adapted is far more egregious in Shaman King compared to Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. And the reason is that even though both kind of cut material out, they both like just censor certain things and whatnot. I'd I'd argue FMA still does it better, and the reason is ultimately comes down to a singular word: censorship. And the fact that because Shaman King was produced to air on Netflix, I think it was kind of already doomed in this regard. And well, I don't necessarily think that's the only reason for a lot of the initial censorship, as Japan really seems to be cracking down on that a lot in general. I'm sure we can point a few fingers to the production committee, as only having 52 episodes to work with did a lot in itself to impact the decisions made with what to censor, what to cut, that kind of thing from the earlier sections of the reboot. But like, regardless of reasoning, I think the ultimate problem is what they did with those earlier sections did dilute a lot of the impact of those those moments, to the point of making the original's anime adaptation feel even better by comparison, which is ironic, despite the latter also having some of those similar problems. Like one of the biggest examples of this in my mind is the battle with Faust. Like, with the battle with Faust, they completely edited, censored out what had pretty much happened to Faust, and the lengths he went to in order to actually defeat Yo. Like, in the manga, he basically tore out his legs in a last ditch effort to defeat Yo. Like, that's basically what he did. But in the manga, they just completely ripped that in the reboot's anime adaptation. They completely ripped that out again, just lacking any sense of impact. And well, again, and which is ironic, and that in itself is also ironic, because the original anime adaptation didn't even do that either. Despite that, and despite having those same problems, it still felt like the studio at the time that was adapting the original anime at least tried harder to work around those limitations. Whereas with I don't know if they were whereas with the reboot, I don't know if they were even trying or not. Now, it should be said that these problems did get progressively better by the time we moved on past the first initial chunk of episodes, and in retrospect, there are even episodes I was pretty harsh on that are even better than I had initially thought. But going back to the FMAB comparison, I think ultimately, when it comes to how this adaptation was handled, it ultimately comes down to how both series worked within their limitations. And again, as much as I loved what the Shaman King reboot did later on past those initial chunks, I do still have to judge it as such. And I think those first initial chunks are I don't want to say they're a deal breaker, but they are definitely the kind of that's where a lot of the mismanagement happened. But again, as far as the rest of the anime goes, that pretty much stuff was pretty much all great. It's just, yeah, those first initial chunks are kind of a bit of a problem. Now, with all that out of the way, let's talk about how the final battle ends, because understand just how unique this ending really is. the villain won. How remains the Spirit King? And granted, there is that small caveat that Yo did succeed in what he set out to do, which is purifying Hao and returning to the person he used to be before his soul became corrupted. Albeit, I guess you could say indirectly, as you could say the Great Spirit kind of had already done that already. Like with the moment Hao obtained the power of the King, at at the it's with the moment Hal obtained the power of the king, his spirit was already cleansed of all like impurities, all rage, all anger, all mistrust, and just everything. He was already like purified at that point. But at the same time, but even knowing that, at the same time, it is kind of a bold move to have your story end with the antagonist ultimately achieving their goal, and even more so, a rarity for a shonen to do that, because while I'd hardly say the stories that have come out of Shonen Jump in recent years or any shonen magazine are devoid of complexity in their writing, it is also true that they also share a very similar trend of protagonist defeats antagonist, then happy, sometimes bittersweet ending of main protagonist journey having achieved their goal. But here, while there is ultimately a happy ending, bittersweet if we're talking about Ren, like seriously, I was never fan or understood the pairing of Ren and Jean, but Ren and Jean, but killing her made me realize that there was always has to be something tragic going on with that man's life. He can never truly be happy, like never have a wife. But anyways, this ending does kind of buck the trend of main protagonist becoming what he set out to become, and instead just living a happy, content life as he is, which honestly, I kind of appreciate for that, and just seeing all of our main cast living happy lives now really just makes the journey all the better. Although, I do find it kind of hilarious as well that what does ultimately convince Hao to just ultimately change is a scolding from his mother. Like, that shit, like, when Hao's mother appeared and she basically slapped him, that part had me rolling, like, oh god. So Asakura's men really are like destined to be slapped, aren't they? Like, I'm sorry, that shit was hilarious. And yeah, one thing I also really appreciate about the final battle in itself with Hao is that we're shown, even though that Yo was granted the power of Earth, one of the five elemental spirits, unlike the others who already had such a command over their elements and naturally adapted to them and knew how to utilize them, Yo had to kind of struggle for a moment to figure out just how to use it, because, as he said, how is he supposed to properly utilize an element that, at best, is finite to its surroundings? Again, a very small detail, but I do like how it forced Yo to kind of think on his feet about how to utilize his element. Also, I just gotta say, the whole bit with the train, seeing everyone's loved ones, friends, and family come to their aid, offer their encouragement, to me, that is like the perfect way to do the motivational trope. Like, there are times where a main character's motivation to push past their limits feels forced, but the way this was handled just felt right, especially with how it brought everyone back, everyone back, even having the X-Laws bring the ultimate last-minute aid, like, of stopping the black hole, like, all that was just great. But also showing that for as many people as there are who've come to aid Yo and the others, there are just as many who come to talk Hao down from his goal because they genuinely care about him. And capping it off with the biggest reveal that the Great Spirit had already cleansed Hao's rage, corruption, all of it. That was definitely a nice way to cap off to cap the whole battle off as well. Like, just showing that, yeah, the Great Spirit really is that powerful that he could even stop Hao's even like do what happened to Hao. With all that said, though, let's get to the one odd thing I didn't like, and it kind of ties into what I said at the start of the review, which is that even though I love this final episode, it felt like it should have been maybe a touch longer, and I'm not even talking like an hour long or something, but just like an extra 5 or 10 minutes or something like that. Like that's all I wanted. But yeah, as a whole, like that's really my that's only my only gripe. It's really just a nitpick when you get down to it. But again, it's not a terrible ending, and I really did like how this. And just like with the manga, I'm still very happy to see the manga more or less fully adapted. But again, as a whole, if I was to sum up my whole experience with this anime, it's been a as a manga reader, it's been a very flawed journey to get there. And I think there are lessons that can be learned from this adaptation, both the good and the bad. Whether Japan and the anime industry actually learns those lessons is an entirely different matter, though. Like, I don't think, like, honestly, I don't, at this point, one thing that needs to change is I don't think I don't think anime should be made, like, specifically in order to be aired on, an anime should be made specifically for the purpose of being streamed on Netflix. Like, that's kind of my thing. Like, I don't think, it's the same problem that's happening with JoJo, too, but, like, I think JoJo's at least going to have a more more beginning to end faithful adaptation, but again, it's like, yeah, I don't know if it worked as well as Shaman King. And honestly, what I'm saying is just doesn't even apply to the anime industry, but the manga side of things as well. Because as I said, I don't think the manga industry should be afraid of endings where the antagonist wins. Because this is a show that this is a series that shows it can work and it can be done well. It just needs like someone who can make it happen. And but yeah, guys, that's all I got for this review. If you enjoyed the video, like, comment, subscribe, follow me on Twitter, Analyst Crunchyroll. Be sure to notification bell, hit the subscribe button, and just share the video around, guys. Dark Knight of Anime, signing off. Later, everyone. And Shaman King, for as high and low as it was, thanks for the journey.